Chapter 2, Part 2, Death in Blackstone. The village at night was noisy compared to Kerne's mountain cave. As he tried to sleep on the boards of the small church, he caught far noises as if they were nearer. His sharp ears heard rafters in the neighboring roundhouses creak, the whispers of wind through thatch, and even the scuff of feet on earthen floors. A solitary shout, in jest or anger. He rose from his sleeping mat and went to the small altar. The circle of the Corpus Vigilos stood raised on a squat pillar of stone. He touched the carved wood. Such large hoops were a work of devotion, requiring care and skill. It would take many years to make the perfect circle. Kerne heard the rustle of the priest entering, and saw the feeble glow of her candle reflected in the polished wood. Vibnia had only recently come to Blackstone, so he did not know her at all. She was wearing warm, practical clothing. Only the bronze circle pendant and the close cropping of her pale brown hair marked her as a priest. "I heard that you made part of it," she said. "Yes," he admitted, remembering his plain stone room in the monastery, with only his whittling knife for company. "When I was younger. Bulray did most of it. He is an expert carver and turner." "You are still young now." He wasn't sure what the priest meant by that, so he ignored it. "Thank you for letting me rest here." Vibnia shrugged her thin shoulders. "One cannot sleep all the dark hours, even this late in spring, so your company is appreciated, and the church is open to all." "You must know what I did," Kerne asked uncertainly. "You refer to the incident in the monastery?" "Abbot Scoterius will never forgive me." "Father Abbot Scoterius will forgive any who repent and dedicate themselves to the good of humanity," she corrected him firmly. Yes, that was Leusios' correct title, but the word father always caught in Kerne's throat. "You don't know him as well as I do," he sighed. "No, I don't. Instead, I have faith in humanity. That is enough." "And do I count?" Vibnia's fingers followed the curve of the great circle. "Do you know which piece you carved?" "No," he shrugged. "They all merge into one." "Exactly." The priest went to a large chest and opened the lid. She pulled out a composite bow of exquisite artisanry and a quiver of dull brown leather. "Are you human?" she asked. Kerne berated himself. Indulging in a moment of self-pity had opened him up to questioning. "Yes," he said, trying not to sound defensive. "Why?" Again, her question was firm and direct. "Because humanity is not just about blood. It is an ideal." Vibnia dwelled on his answer, and she closed the chest and laid out the bow and quiver on its lid. "So you have not forsaken your training and your beliefs?" She paused to look directly at him. "You have not abandoned us, so I will not abandon you." Kerne stared at the priest in surprise, not sure what to say. She turned back to unroll the bundle of arrows and drew one out to inspect it. "What manner of creature do you think is out there, Kerne?" Still unsettled by the manner of this new priest, it took him a moment to realize she had asked a question. "A demon," he answered emphatically. "How can you be so sure?" "What else can kill a man like that?" She frowned and inspected the next arrow. "Have you ever encountered a real demon?" "No. Have you?" "No. And yet you and I agree on what it is." Vibnia examined 2 more arrows before speaking again. "In the Empire, an age of reason denies what you and I take on faith. Tell me, how do you know it was tracking poor Fernan?" The priest provoked an odd combination of discomfort and trust. He decided to answer truthfully. I felt it, like spicy scent that sickened my stomach, or a grating sound that shivered in my bones. I cannot explain better than that." Vibnia gave a thin smile. "That is explanation enough." The church door opened to reveal a heavily cloaked figure of great height and stature. Kerne didn't recognize him by the little he could see in the dim light of the candle, nor by his scent, which was human with a hint of mystery. "Culain?" Vibnia bowed at the newcomer. "Oh, Fercy." The black-robed figure bowed deeply in return. His voice pronounced the Kiddush honorific with deep resonance that filled the church without effort. Kerne, too, bowed. "Master Culain, we have not met before." The hooded head nodded to him, a more modest greeting, but more welcome than he normally received in this village. "No, we have not, Master Kerne." Just Kerne. The shadows around the new man's face drew back to show a white smile. The man was thick-set and in his 40s. "You will never be just Kerne," mused Culain. "Warrior Kerne, then. I have information about the beast you seek. Promise me this. You will fight it whatever the danger, and then I will help." "I promise," Kerne said immediately. "Even at the risk of your own life?" In a life beset by conflict, Kerne had certainties that his own heart clung to. I could never allow another one to die if I had a chance to save them. The deep note of Culain's consideration hung in the air of the church. Then he made a decision. "Very well. Come morning, set out on the eastern track to the Valley Farms. You will find its trail there." "How do you know this?" asked Vibnia with polite curiosity. "You know that people here call me the Watcher. I have more than my own eyes to watch with." Culain bowed and withdrew, closing the door. "What did that mean?" Kerne asked the priest. Vibnia was contemplating the bare face of the door where Culain had stood. "That I am yet to discern. For a man who remains aloof from the people of this village and cares little for gossip or rumor, Culain the Watcher has taken an uncommon interest in this beast and wishes you, in particular, to fight it." Kerne led Leusios, Jorwin, and Vibnia out of the village at first light and down the eastern track. "Why east?" Leusios asked immediately. "Culain told us." Kerne waved a hand to Vibnia and back to himself. "The Watcher? Why? What else did he say?" "Just that," said Kerne with a shrug. Leusios looked to Vibnia for more, but the priest was preoccupied, pulling a flask from inside her traveling coat. She uncorked it and took a delicate sip. The track followed the river Rudthiel downstream as they left Blackstone behind. The river was deeper here and rich with water weeds hiding a wealth of red gills and mottled carp. The bright dawn sun skimmed the water, making the rising morning mist shimmer gold. Gaudron Fisher hailed them from his little boat on the river, and Leusios waved back. Such a simple exchange tugged at Kerne. Hidden behind his helmet, his every instinct told him never to engage with the Blackstoners except when necessary. Nevertheless, just watching the fisherman happily going about his work opened a vein in his soul that bled out hunger for a simpler life. From this point, the river Rudthiel weaved out to an ever-broadening valley. The harsh and stony ground sank beneath rich loam, the true wealth of Blackstone, shared by the monks in return for their tithe. They passed the derelict mill on the far bank, its black skeleton showing the first signs of moss and lichen. Behind it, and following the northern bank, the guardian peaks diminished, dropping down to a rugged line of cliffs that defined the southern edge of the plateau and the steppes beyond. "The Ice Palisade," Jorwin pronounced in his tale-teller's voice. "I must return in winter to see it in its full glory. I heard that the mists rise from the Rudthiel and freeze on its face, making great ice crystals. I'm told they glitter like diamonds in the midwinter sun and cast 1,000 rainbows." "I suspect that the tales tell it richer than the truth," murmured Vibnia with an apologetic smile. "Ah, but you've only seen it in hereabouts." Jorwin swept his hand in the direction they were walking.
The palisade stretches many miles east. Have you walked its length to find this spectacle? It is best not to judge what you do not know, Durian.
Kerne caught the edge of dislike in the bard's tone, but the priest was unmoved.
Perhaps we should walk that path together one day, she conceded with a shrug.
I thought of walking that way, Leusios said. Many leagues eastwards, beyond Arcetish wilds, it peters out into hills and enters the most northerly borderlands claimed by the Novoborundum.
An imperial colony,
the bard muttered.
Leusios shrugged.
I've always wondered if a trade route could be open that way. I would love to see a pagoda. They say they are the tallest buildings in the world.
Jorwin frowned and was about to retort, but Kerne grabbed his arm.
All of you, he snapped. Ready your weapons.
Pulling his great sword from his back and drawing it from the sheath, he gestured towards a body sprawled across the rutted track ahead. They approached it cautiously. Kerne's sight was sharp, and he already knew what had happened. It had been sucked dry of every drop of body fluid, leaving a rigid and twisted corpse. As Vibnia strung her bow and Leusios drew his long knife, Kerne led Jorwin closer to the body. The bard had a staff and swung it warily around, guarding against the undergrowth and scattered trees.
"It's Harrigan," said Vibnia.
She set aside her bow and knelt to give the corpse benediction. Kerne circled his heart in respect.
"He worked at the same farm as Fernan," said Leusios.
Kerne's nostrils flared with the scents in the air, the metallic tang of blood, the sweat of his companions, spring flowers, and something else.
"Is that a coincidence?" Leusios looked away from the body, his face as pale as his hair.
Kerne inhaled deeper.
Yes. There was a subtle aroma that reminded him of a treat on monastery feast days.
Pepper? His orcish senses pared away the stronger odors to draw out the spice. No, it was not pepper. He had encountered this scent for the first time yesterday evening, in Gwyndel's cellar. "Did he die last night?" he asked. Vibnia finished her prayer and examined the body.
"Hard to tell. It is the fluid of the body that tells us the story of its death. Harrigan could have been dead for years, except..."
"Except?" Leusios had an intense manner about him, his arms folded tightly, radiating suppressed energy.
"There's dew on the grass beneath him," Vibnia observed. "He died recently. This morning."
Jorwin had been studying the ground around them.
"There are many tracks here, and I don't recognize them," he muttered. "It's as if they appear from nowhere."
His fingers stretched out as he followed the action imprinted in the moist earth.
He spun on his heel, taken by surprise, and barely made 2 steps backwards. Then it, or they, had him.
Kerne could read prints well enough, but these were confused.
They? The tracks are so random and unfamiliar. I can't say whether there's 1, 2, or even 3 attackers. One thing I'm certain of. It isn't human.
Fernan, now Harrigan. There's a pattern here.
Leusios looked east to Toothley's bean farm. Kerne's heart skipped a beat. Elayna lived there with her husband Niall and his father Toothley.
"Look in on me daughter,"
Captain Hal had asked him quietly last night, and he had promised to do so. Quickly, his muscles powered his legs into a sprint, driven by the rising drumbeat of his heart. He reached the point where a track slid away from the road, where he turned with a skid towards the homestead. Jorwin was close behind. He was fit for a human. The ground was low and marshy here, some of the poorest for farming. Toothley's roundhouse was a sad, sodden affair. He had built it on rotting timber piles to escape the occasional flood from the Rudthiol. That was why he planted marsh beans that flourished in swampy ground. His older brother Farne had inherited the higher land and enjoyed good wheat-bearing fields. A woman was sweeping the timber steps that climbed to a crude porch. She looked up, and Kerne's pace faltered at the sight of her. Elayna. In a land of black hair, hers was a red gold, as rich as autumn's gilt, and her open face would put anyone at their ease. Her skin was milk-pale, like most Keats, and her figure toned from the work in the fields. Everyone knew Niall's wife was the beauty of the valley. As a teenage novice, Kerne had stolen glances at her when he was in the village, when the monks were not looking. He bowed and fumbled his words. "Mistress Elayna." She blessed him with a smile, but her chestnut brown eyes showed that she was unnerved by his appearance and the bared steel of his greatsword. "Take your breath. You have run yourself hoarse." In truth, it was her, not the run, who had stolen his breath so. Jorwin jogged up beside him and executed a stylish bow. "Is Farmer Toothly or his son hereabouts, dear lady?" "Maybe." Her manner became suspicious. "You came from the village?" "Yes," Kerne started. "So, where's Harrigan?" Elayna had a force to her nature and was clearly disappointed in her missing farmhands. "And I hope Fernan has prepared you with a very good story." Kerne paused, unwilling to burden her with the news. Jorwin was not so delicate. "Fernan and Harrigan are dead. We're in pursuit of whatever slew them." Kerne looked at him in surprise. He had assumed that the bard would have had a gentler manner, given the pain of the news. Elayna's face went white, but her manner became stern. "This is horrible." "What?" She clutched her broom like a weapon, and came down the steps to finish the question, eye to eye, with the bard. "You say, whatever. You speak as if no person did this. Was it an orc?" Kerne flinched inwardly. "Why do you ask?" he asked before he could stop himself. She looked at him. Long ago, he had resolved never to be ashamed of what he was. Now, for the first time since he so swore, he was grateful that his helmet hid his features. "Your voice," she said with a penetrating look. "You must be Kerne." He sagged inwardly. His reputation had preceded him. "Yes." "There's an orc who's been stealing our crops. A spindly thing. Niall has chased him off several times. But I do not believe him capable of killing." "Oh, Charga." Kerne knew the orc outcast. "No, I do not think him capable of these terrible crimes." Elayna turned to Jorwin, still uncertain. "What do you say?" Her lack of trust stung. Strange, given he ignored worse barbs from others. "No orc could kill in the manner we've seen," Jorwin confirmed. "And who are you to know such things?" she asked, still gripping the broom with white knuckles. At least her wariness was not reserved for half-orcs alone. "Jorwin Weaver, visiting bard, at your service." Kerne's sharp ears picked up a gasping sound some way up the track. Leusios was catching up. "Where are Toothly and Niall?" he asked urgently. They might be in danger. Leusios arrived panting hard. "Elayna!" He managed the greeting between gasps. Finally, seeing a familiar face, her manner opened up. "Leusios, is it true? Fernan? Harrigan?" "Yes," the youth gasped. "Fernan last night. Harrigan this morning." "Bless divine. I only just asked him to look for Fernan." She did not waste any time with questions. "Take that track," she pointed. "It loops through all the bean fields. Niall and Pa Toothly will be in one of them." Kerne did not wait for Leusios to recover his breath. "Jorwin and I will find them, and bring them back safely. You stay." The younger man just nodded, his hands on his knees while he gulped lungfuls of air. Kerne set off without another word, the bard close behind him. This year, Irverwell the fresh wind had blessed Blackstone, bringing warm winds from the far ocean and lavishing the land with sun and rain in good measure. Toothly's marsh beans may not be a wealthy crop, but they grow quickly, giving food early in the year. They had reached head height, forcing Kerne to crane his neck to see over the wavering greenery as he ran. They passed through 2 fields before Jorwin shouted, "There!" He pointed out 2 mops of hair, one gray and one black, bobbing in and out of the beanstalks.
"Toothly! Niall!"
Kerne shouted.
"Aye?"
came the startled reply.
"Stay where you are. We're coming to help you."
They turned off the raised path and down into the damp field. The forest of thick, fleshy stems cut off their line of sight to the farmers. Niall's shouted query was lost as a gust of wind shook the beanstalks. Kerne forged ahead, guided by the drifting odor of honest sweat and toil. Niall called out again.
"I said why? Who's there?"
His lyrical Keetish accent was full of curiosity. There was a lower grumble from his father. A spicy scent flooded the field. Evil had returned. Kerne's gut chilled.
"Both of you, run to me!"
he bellowed as he hefted his greatsword and charged. There was a thrashing amongst the beanstalks, then a brief scream, a shout, another cry that cut off. Moments later, Kerne burst onto a gory scene. Niall was twitching amongst broken stems and churned mud, his throat torn out and still pumping blood. His killer was crashing away through amidst the crop. Kerne jumped over the body and chased the unseen beast along a path of smashed stems and turned back west. He caught sight of Toothly's boots being dragged away through the battered stalks. Putting on a spurt of speed, he turned a corner and crashed into a dead end of beanstalks. He steadied himself to absolute stillness and tuned every sense into the quietening field. Toothly's body lay twisted at his feet, but of the beast there was no sign. It had gone, vanished into the very air once more. The pot of bean meal bubbling over the fire made Leusios' stomach rumble. It was his least favorite food, but an inexplicable hunger had seized him. "Do you mind?" He gestured at the ladle. Elayna was standing by the door, staring out towards the eastern bean fields. She looked back in, gripped by fear for her husband and her father. "Sorry?" Before he could repeat himself, she read his body language. "Help yourself." She broke off and stepped outside. "Did you hear something? A cry, maybe?" "No." Lucius doled out a generous portion and joined her by the doorway. "You'll have a good harvest." He waved toward the fields with a wooden spoon. "Your beans prosper when the wheat struggles to get growing." "Blessed Elayna has been generous to us," she admitted, still not taking her eyes off the eastern fields. "Fortunate. Your land may be poor for wheat, but your beans are monsters," Leusios pointed out. "I heard Mistress Murgathwin say that without your harvest, we would have starved last winter." "She's too kind. In truth, it was the sheep and cattle who did best on the stalks as winter feed." Lucius knew her brave smile covered the truth, that she and Niall struggled to support Toothly. Leusios never understood why she married the bean farmer boy last year. Apparently, they really loved each other, but he was always suspicious of such talk. Love usually sounded more like an excuse for something more material, but Niall didn't have anything of value. He watched how worry tightened her lips. Elayna was easy on the eye, and a sense of regret took him. Given their closeness in age, he should have got to know her better. But Captain Hal's stern watchfulness made an idle tumble with his daughter far too dangerous. He looked around. She had made a good effort with Toothly's rotting roundhouse, hanging woven rushes to partition the sleeping area, and making the living space quite comfortable with a few tatty hides. He scooped a mouthful of bean meal with his fingers. The flavor hit him. "Oh!" He looked at the bowl. "What?" It was nice. He took another mouthful. The beans had a spicy flavor that was hard to place. "This tastes great." She shook her head. "It's what we must rely on here. We barter for grain, but with the poor harvest last year and the mill gone..." Leusios grunted and concentrated on his bowl. She had unwittingly pricked his guilt. "I can't just stand here." She turned on her heel and went past him into the sleeping area. The hanging partition made it gloomy that far back in the roundhouse. "What are you up to?" She emerged from the sleeping area with the family spear.
"I'm going out to look for Niall."
A prickling sensation ran all over his skin. The air tingled, and irrational fear seized him.
"Get away from there."
A silhouette rose behind her. Leusios dashed forwards and grabbed her arm. The beast surged out. Jaws crammed with hooked teeth snapped at them. A limb kicked him in the midriff and sent him sprawling. Elayna yelled and swung at what looked like a hairless, eyeless wolf. Leusios raised his hands in terror, a pitiful defense. As the monster roared and lunged with its unnatural array of limbs, it happened. The sensation was like drowning in liquid fire surging from within his bones. It filled his lungs and choked his throat. Magic ripped through Leusios. Arcs of lightning leapt from his outstretched hands. Everywhere it struck, rafters, thatch, reed mats, and hangings, all exploded into flames. The demon squealed. Elayna caught his arm, dragging him down the steps so fast their legs tangled. They tumbled down into a heap at the bottom and grappled in panic to point the spear back at the hut door. There they clung to each other and the spear, expecting the monster to pounce at any moment. It did not appear. Despite the dampness of the wattle and wood, the fire was spreading hungrily through the roundhouse, bursting through the thatch roof and engulfing the interior in rolling waves of flame. The sight and smells fired the same memories that stalked Leusios' nightmares. His hands trembled on the spear against Elayna's own steady grip. He could not suppress a sob as the pit of his stomach churned and threatened to loosen his bowels. 3 years ago, he had waited like this for his father to emerge from the burning mill. Kerne never did. Neither did the demon.
"Is it dead?"
asked Elayna, her voice strained. He didn't answer. He just held on to her and the spear, trembling with fatigue. It was as if he had spent every morsel of energy his body had to burn. Vibnia arrived, wheezing from running. She had an arrow knocked.
"Leusios, what happened?"
"It attacked us. I think it's gone."
The priest inspected the burning farmhouse without expression. Then she looked back at him and Elayna. She pulled her flask from inside her coat and took a sip. Recovering quickly, her breathing became measured and she spoke evenly.
"Thank the divine, you are both unharmed."
Kerne and Jorwin came running out of the fields.
"What happened?"
The warriors shouted over the roaring flames. So many witnesses. Leusios needed an answer, a lie to hide behind. Would Elayna doubt what she had just seen? Her resolution in the face of danger was melting into shock. Now the threat had passed. He pulled her closer in a comforting hug, wrapping one arm around her ears. She pressed against him, shivering as she grappled with the horror.
"The beast attacked us,"
Leusios said softly, unable to keep a tremor from his voice.
I threw hot embers at it from the hearth, and it fled."
"What was it?" demanded Vibnia.
I don't know. It happened so fast. Nothing of this world. Wolf-like, but without fur. And so many teeth. Horrible teeth.
The priest and half-orc shared a slight nod, accepting an unspoken truth between them. Well done. You were brave. Kerne knelt by them and clapped him on the shoulder. The gesture was warm, yet his tone was grave. He noticed Jorwin was standing awkwardly, and they were here without Toothly and the owl. "Embers from the fire, you say?" Vibnia's brow creased. "I'm surprised the fire spread that quickly." Leusios checked Elayna. Would she doubt, or better, dismiss what he had done as a trick of her panicked memory? He saw recollection kindling in her beautiful brown eyes. She looked at him, the question forming. "Where's Niall?" he blurted out to Kerne. Elayna twisted in his arms, all questions discarded save one.
"Niall, why is he not with you?"
She broke away from Leusios to stand. He rose shakily beside her, leaning on the spear. Why was he so tired? A stupid question, and he knew the answer. He had done it, again. Kerne balked at responding. After an uncomfortable pause, Jorwin took her hands in his. The bard's voice finally became gentle.
I'm so sorry.
Elayna doubled up in anguish, jerking her hands away from Jorwin. Then she lunged back at him, beating the bard's chest and screaming in denial. All the while, Kerne stood awkwardly to one side. Leusios' sigh of relief was covered by her cries. Whatever she had seen in the hut was irrelevant now. He drew Elayna off Jorwin into a hug, which she accepted amidst racking sobs. The embrace was not for her, but to cover his own weakness. It was the same drained feebleness he had suffered 3 years ago when the magic had first come. The day when he had burned down the mill. The day when he had killed his father and stepmother. That concludes Chapter 2, Death in Blackstone. Next time, the village mourns its losses, but the party refuses to give up. Kerne sets off in pursuit of the monster with the help of the mysterious Elayna, the Watcher. See you next week, everybody.